So today we're going to be talking about unlocking the potential of connectivity through collaboration and innovation in emerging markets. Big and grand. When you look at the geographies that have got the greatest growth in the coming years, it's South Asia, Southeast Asia, and actually you look across the Middle East Africa region, it's all going to need top-class digital infrastructure. It's all going to need new digital services. And I think we've all finally figured out that nobody can do this on their own. Everybody, all the children need to play together and play properly. And that's why we've got a very great panel to discuss all of these themes this afternoon. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves. They'll do it a lot better than me. Can we start with Sohail? Sohail?
Hi everyone, my name is Sohail Kadir. I am the CEO of Zain Omantel International, called Zoe. We are a wholesale powerhouse in the Middle Eastern region, covering 8 countries, including Oman, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan, and Sudan. And we are basically, by the name you can see, it's Zain Omantel International, so it's a joint venture between Zain Group and Omantel. Thank you.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Bikash. I work for Telstra. We are again a telecom provider providing connectivity in Asia and Pacific region. What we believe is global supplier for the world. That's all I am. Thank you.
Good day to everybody. My name is Brendan Press. I'm the CCO for Gulf Bridge International, GBI. We're a specialist subsea cable provider for the Middle East region, connecting most, if not all, the countries in the region, providing cable services, but also terrestrial in the region from the east to the west. So we provide services across the Gulf, across the Middle East region, out to Europe, and from Asia to Asia as well. So very interested in how we can make this market develop further with analysts and many more people in the region.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amarjit Gupta. I'm the founder CEO of a name you'll possibly got used to only last 2 years. We are a young company, but we are here to fill up a space which the other incumbents haven't. In short, we're filling up a space connecting the cloud with fiber and whatever it means in each of this market. Largely present in India. We're trying to help cooperating with partners over here to find our space to create expansions in regions across Asia and Middle East.
I'm Sean Bergen. I'm the co-founder of AP Telecom. AP Telecom's specialty is consulting to the submarine cable space. We focus heavily on the pre-sales market for new submarine cable builds, and we also do a lot of due diligence consulting for M&A and private equity.
So there you go. You've got all the experts here. Just as a bit of background, we're going through one of those episodic upgrade cycles in subsea, and that usually drives a lot of how ecosystem development goes. Huge amounts of new bandwidth to Africa, Asia, and then on to Europe. Yesterday we spoke about to Africa, but you've got Equiano, you've got Blue Raman, you've got Echo, you've got Bifrost, you've got ALC, you've got Juno, Apricot, and I've probably forgotten quite a few in there. We got GBI, who continues to grow and delivers new services, certainly compared to what was in the portfolio at the outset. We've got hyperscalers and content providers literally investing billions and billions of dollars to address the huge market demand. As we see the internet effectively coming home and getting closer. So edge. However you define edge will be a part of this conversation. And then you see actors like Equinix and DRT. They're usually good at figuring out where the next places to go are. And we saw that last year in Africa, Equinix acquiring Main One, DRT acquiring Terraco. And there's some interesting alliances that have been formed to address this as people group together, and we're very happy with Sohail here. We're going to ask him to tell us what Zoe is, okay? Because that's going to play a big role in the region. Sorry, I'm used to being in Dubai, right? So, and then not to mention new dynamic players like Lightstorm, who are firing up a real storm because they're challenging the status quo in India and now seeking to go beyond. So everything's kind of moving at warp speed, trying to keep track of all the different bits and trying to understand who actually will play with who and how all that works is going to be key. So as we kind of kick off the questions here, my first one would be, when you look at this tsunami of bandwidth arriving, equal tsunami of demand for content and services, what do you see as the major challenges that we all face in fulfilling the demand, and what will drive the investment decisions? And from a deployment perspective, what are the difficulties? Maybe, let's start. Maybe Brendan, could I ask you to go first on that one?
Yeah, I mean, the opportunity is very significant. Everybody knows that in terms of data growth over the last few years and what we're seeing going forward. I mean, predictions of doubling of capacity requirements globally. And in this region, we've not been the quickest at adopting some of the services. So there's a tremendous catching up we've got to do, I think, in the Middle East as an emerging market to keep up with the new services that need to be delivered. And with those services, the extra demand and capacity. So for us at GBI, our planning horizons have had to increase significantly. We've had to ensure that we are predicting what that demand looks like, working not just on a sort of 100 gig here, 100 gig there. Maybe we'll get something in the next few months in terms of the relationships we have today, but relationships we have with the OTTs and the wider market in terms of how the growth is going to happen and ensuring that we've got capacities in place to meet that demand. So we have to be better at forecasting, and we have to make investment decisions that allow us to be able to provide that capacity. And as everybody knows, capacity needs to be ordered in good time. So you need to make sure that you've got those investments in place to serve the capacity. So just an example for last year, one of the things we had to predict on and ensure that we had the level of demand catered for was the World Cup in Qatar. A tremendous event, the first time in this part of the world, the Middle East, say this part of the world, not the Middle East, but that part of the world. And again, in terms of planning for that, we had to work very closely with vendors, etc., to ensure we had the ready available capacities to support that. So planning is essential.
And a follow-up question there on the planning, because I speak with a lot of carriers, and many as they plan, for example, subsea capacity, I've done the historic thing of planning for own needs as opposed to planning for there's a commercial opportunity. And now with the market forecasted to grow so much, I've certainly seen a number of carriers who are pretty much out of capacity, and they're only investing years down the road, which means having their own capacity to be able to resell is, there's a kind of gap in that. Is that something that, you've seen? And I'd throw a more general question, and maybe you have good visibility of this, Sean, but, first of all, Brendan, I mean, have you seen some of your competitors or peers, two ways of calling them, getting caught short?
Yeah, I mean, timing now is everything. I mean, there's a lot of new investments in the region and cables coming in that require us and others to make decisions to when we get in, how we get in, whether we're part of a consortium. Typically, GBI is to remain private, so we own all our own cable, and typically, that's how we're going to continue to do so. But definitely, timing is critical, and people are getting in. Whether they're getting in at the right time, I believe. At the moment, we have a number of options in front of us. For instance, a lot of it depends on when this capacity will be available to us and at what point we invest. So
Sean, I mean, you've got a pretty good outside-in view on this. So what's your view? How many folks have been caught short and how many have got it right?
It's regional, right? I think, there's a pretty big focus here on the Middle East, for example, in the whole GCC region. It's kind of starved for capacity.
Yeah.
GBI's kind of getting full, wax is full, there's consistent upgrades, and, everybody's sitting back holding their breath, seeing what happens with TIAS, EMC, N1, CME V6, and there's all these challenges in,
Still talking about CME V6.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Subcom have won that one. So then you've also got to throw on top of that issues with places like Yemen, and it all just gets very challenging.
Yeah.
Right. But I think in the broader context, if you look at the Pacific, which you mentioned, which is, I suppose, closer to this side of the world, what frightens me when we talk about constraint is the opposite. And if you think about Echo, Bifrost, Apricot, potentially Hawaii Nui, ACC1, that's 5 systems times around 16 pairs each. There's 100 fibre pairs coming into service in the next 5 years. There's less than 20 fibre pair buyers globally. Right?
Yeah.
So this whole mantra of chasing cost per bit, which is pretty much an OTT thought process,
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily sit well with the GBIs of the world and the Lightstorms of the world. It's creating an issue for the market for the future. There's just going to be a massive glut, prices will tank, and then it's going to get pretty tough to make money out of that business unless you've got core demand. So the days of the GBI, I think, are going to be one of the last of that breed who develop a system to make money off of that without really having core demand themselves as an operator. Mm-hmm. It's a different business model to a Lightstorm who has core demand for their own client base and do wholesale as a focus. And Telstra, much the same. I mean, Telstra is its own best customer to a large extent, particularly in Asia Pac. And I think that this chasing the lowest cost per bit with SDM systems versus building, smaller systems and keeping the market constrained to hold the prices up.
Yeah.
Is a sort of we're creating our own problem.
Because there's also the problem of increasingly people are doing shorter term leases, and every time you crank the handle, so to speak, you're taking 15% price decrease every time you do it at least.
And who's going to buy 100? How is the market going to soak up 100 pairs across the Pacific in the next 10 years?
Yeah. So that too is going to drive the prices. This is all very depressing. So if you're
sorry, prices are going up. Demand's
if you're a cable operator, okay. But let's stay on the theme of subsea just for a minute here. Given that so much depends on it, one of the things that needs to be completely robust and also needs to scale is the subsea ecosystem. Because we saw over COVID, I can't remember which year, but 2 of the ships sank, and then that put a crimp in everybody's RFS dates. And then the supply chain, I mean, the cable manufacturers were all sold out because, between Meta and Google, they had 2 years worth of stuff to do. So, I mean, Sohail, I know you've got a view on this. So, yeah, what do you think the risks are in that part? Because we talk about it like as if it's going to come naturally, but actually it's very few things need to go wrong before that whole part of the business hits a bit of a wall. Would you agree with that?
Fully agree with that, Carl. I think not only few, even one go wrong and everything goes wrong. I think we were discussing about the problems that we are facing in Yemen. All the cable systems that are going to pass through there, we have an issue at the moment. Nobody is allowed to do even the survey. So forget about deployment. Now, I think when we are talking about the cable systems that are delayed, I think every cable system that we have, none of the cable system has been delivered on the RFS date. None of them. Every cable system has at least 1 or maybe 2 years of delay for multiple reasons. It can be a permit reason in another country. It can be a reason that one of the ship is down, the engine got blown up, and they don't have a ship, and ship has to come. It will take another few months. monsoon season, number of things. But I think one of the point that I would like to highlight over here is that even when the cable systems are up and running, and we are looking at now by 2024 end, or let's say Q1 2025, you will have at least 4 to 5 new cable systems coming in. And Sean, you're rightly saying we are talking about 80 pair of fiber system coming into Middle East, right? But the problem that we are facing, and I think it's a serious problem, and I believe personally that we should highlight it and do something about it as an industry, is that we don't have the maintenance ships. The maintenance ships, there are only 35 ships in the world who are doing the maintenance of the cable systems, and their average age is 27 years old.
I wouldn't take a cruise on those.
Yep. And normally when you talk to these ship vessels owners, 30 to 33 years is a retirement age for the vessel. Otherwise, you will be putting a lot more money to renew that ship or vessel instead of building a new one. Now, any vessel that is new, it requires almost $110 to $150 million investment, but it takes 4 years to build a ship. And as of today, we know that there is only one ship is in construction phase, that is for Orange Marine. And other than that, nobody is building any ship. So I personally believe that in next 5 years as an industry, although we are focusing and investing billions of dollars on the submarine, but in next 5 years, we will have a major issue in maintenance side.
Okay, I mean, that's a great observation, actually, because nobody thinks of this stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Just a couple of things on that. We've just finished actually a massive report on the mean time to repair in the Pacific and the South China Sea. I don't know if you guys remembered in the early 2000s when there was all those earthquakes in the Luzon and all the cables went down at the same time. Do you know all of those got fixed in 6 weeks? Now, the mean time to repair in the South China Sea is 8 months. And this isn't about ships being unavailable. This is about geopolitics, right? So there's the geopolitics, there's the permitting, there's the unavailability of ships, and you're 100% spot on. This is a bigger issue than a system being delayed by 6 months in terms of a new build. And I think Alan was talking on stage, suboptic, $40 trillion a day of financial transactions go across submarine cables. Every country depends on these financial transactions, yet it's in the hands of private contractors and third-party organisations. Right? I mean, how dumb is this? So I think governments are going to have to step up at some point.
Yeah.
The British government has started doing so. But I think governments and navies are going to have to start getting involved in this whole maintenance process to preserve the sovereignty of their countries and to actually keep the economies moving.
Yeah, you're full of good news today, Sean. I mean, but actually, when you see how fragile that is, then all these stories about submarines going down and sabotaging the world's economy are not too far-fetched. But beyond the kind of James Bond aspect, Bikash, I mean, you have to do network planning. So, what? I mean, you don't look worried, but what keeps you worried?
Look, sir, as far as I look on the submarine ecosystem, which literally carry 95% on voice of data, at least on international part of the world, we as a Telstra, we feel quite positive. I agree with Son that mean time of repair has gone up by 7 months. Sorry, sir, AAG has not repaired yet, so I don't agree. Problem is that, yes, we have faced a lot of challenges. If you talk about last 5 years, first we have COVID, before that we have geopolitical situation. We have lived through those situations, what both the gentlemen covered, geopolitics situation, microeconomics, supply chain delay. But we are still there, right? We are still delivering 4 petabytes of capacity as of last year. And we are on the right track. If I'm not wrong, somewhere around $10 million investment was done between 2017 to 21. And few of the people sitting on the board has invested more than that in last 2 years.
Right.
So the point is, if we keep investing, we fire all the cylinder, we use the lit capacity like what Brendan has said, the GBI is lighting up, it has reached to a scale, fine. We'll keep trying to fire all the possible option, be it lighting, be it investing into the new, as Sohail mentioned, investment into the submarine machines or the infrastructure is needed in any shape and form. And it need to come from various sources. I mean, telco cannot invest into the submarine or ship repair facility.
Right.
It has to come from the other part of the world. More or less, we feel positive about it. We are going on right direction. And if we set up that partner ecosystem where we push the shipbuilding company that, guys, there is a demand, they will be making money at the end from this ecosystem or those 40 million trillion transactions which are happening on the network. So that's what is my view, sir.
Okay, good. Well, we've done our kind of voyage to the bottom of the sea, as it were, and so let's come back on land. And Amajit, I mean, you're challenging the status quo in India with a fresh approach. How do you see the development? Because obviously, it's great, everything comes under the sea, and we should always remember the fact that you talk to any person in the street, and if you tell them, how do you think the internet is delivered? They think it comes through satellite, not 90% of people. You tell them it all comes under the sea, they kind of look at you as if you're going crazy. So it's important to understand how important subsea is. But, then we get on land, and then there's a different kind of infrastructure that needs to be put in place with new services. And, Amajit, when, the whole idea around Lightstorm, delivering services in a specific way, could you explain how you kind of revolutionizing the delivery of services to enterprise customers in India? Because I think it's really cool.
Thank you, Carl. So, look, we are a newborn, so we come with contrarian view, which is a departure from the normal. So I'll start with where we come from. We think telco and telco wholesale, in particular as an industry, needs to have a new view of life. And the new view of life is one which looks for real problems to be solved as opposed to solutions looking for problems to be solved. My vantage point of example, subsea, very many times kind of stares at me in the face and says, hey, why is this even existing when there is no problem to be solved? 50 pairs idle under the bed of the sea is criminal. So we extend that logic to almost every phase to saying that the type of traffic has changed. Our role in the industry, and we as a company strongly believe that in the context of what the hyperscalers are doing, has changed. Characterizing traffic as data, in our view, is wrong. Characterizing traffic as patterns of traffic, which the hyperscalers are constantly moving across particularly emerging markets, is asking for networks to be designed, which fundamentally come from a premise of build to change as opposed to build to last. So there's where, Carl, to your question, what are we doing in Lightstorm? We're basically following the paradigm that this change will impact network design and the way it evolves across terrestrial, across submarine, and across all fiber. One thing is true, we actually believe that fiber is the future, under the sea, on terrestrial, as opposed to many theories about wireless. So therefore, we believe fiber will be deeper and deeper into enterprises and even the homes, and it requires spatial treatment. The other thing I want to mention is the business approach to dealing with networks as an infrastructure class. We are invested by a large infrastructure investor, and when I look at the utilization of any other infrastructure type of this kind, whether it's roads, airports, railway stations, energy stations, there's nothing of the kind of fiber, including subsea fiber and terrestrial, because subsea and terrestrial is the only infrastructure class which barely has a utilization of 20% or 25% for the first 5 to 7 years. Now that's from an investment philosophy. It sounds really weird as to how this industry is shaped up. So in short, Carl, for us, it's about combining the march of technology, following the march of cloud, and redesigning networks, which makes sense for the future. Obviously, we are a greenfield. We can leapfrog. We don't have a legacy to protect. But I think when I sit here on stage with my industry peers, I actually urge for collaboration, progressive thinking, because part of it is the government, part of it is also incumbents who today block out cable landing system with extraordinary charges. Nobody asks anybody to do that across continents, block access to cable landing stations and sometimes even interconnects. And you know, my argument to my colleagues is, when you have a phenomenon which is $1 trillion phenomenon, growing at 40% per year, with about a $70 billion R&D dollars behind it, this tsunami won't stop. So it's going to crash regulatory barriers as well as incumbency barriers. So we are basically trying to play our part to creating space, which our friends in the industry have done, but also catering to the march of the cloud and what newer networks need.
Okay, thanks for that. And look, on the theme of collaboration, you may want to keep the mic just for a second. Clearly, different kinds of networks need to interconnect seamlessly. I know there's a number of initiatives in the marketplace today where a lot of tier one carriers are getting together and to try and co-develop NAS platforms. Won't kind of comment on that because I think there's lots of issues there which are not the subject of what we're discussing here. However, the concept of having, you know, a NAS platform where you can have subsea on NAS, terrestrial, across, you know, multiple different providers, do you see that as, you know, the goal? Because consumption models are all about on demand. For different kind of services, and is connectivity going to be enough? Is there going to be a need for a service layer on top of that with APIs? So maybe I'll stay with you, Amajit, on that.
No, that's a great question, Carl. And that goes back to what I said. If data is no longer data, data is cloud, and the cloud is scalable to the extent that it is, which means you can spin up a cloud session in seconds, you can shut it down in seconds. So necessarily, if your network is the underlay of the cloud, you should be able to spin it up in a second and shut it down in a second. Now, anybody in our part of the world will tell you that telco networks are not built for that. One of the big challenges is to be able to build networks with the speed and scale of cloud. And that's what we are struggling with. Whether in demand planning or whether in capital deployment, I think the ability to match the scale and speed of what these cloud guys do is really the challenge we face as an industry. We find the secret clock to be able to match that speed and scale, and NAS is a manifestation. After all, it just abstracts the network up to a do it yourself, non-traditionalizes, if there's a word for it, all the software aspects of the backend. We have done it ground up in India, and we have found it very, very attractive, not only for small businesses and media businesses, but also large enterprises. And we think there's a case for that to actually span across the span of networks from subsea, terrestrial, as well as access.
And Sean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think we're getting to a point, once some of these satellite services scale as well, I think it'll get to a point where people won't care what the underlying technology is that's delivering the solution, as long as the solution's being delivered at the scale the customer wants, for the period they want, for the price they want. We're starting to see, like in the subsea space with WSS technology, the ability for APIs to be shared with clients, for them to reroute their own traffic, even at that layer one level, that's coming. And I think once you've got that and you can scale up to, the OSI stack, layer 3, layer 4, and the customer themselves can activate it with their credit card online, it's going to be a wonderful day. See, that wasn't negative.
No, that was really good, actually. And do you think that carriers need to get into that additional services layer and participate in the revenue streams, those digital revenue streams? Stay with you as you're on a positive there.
Yeah, I do. And I think, the telcos, to a large extent, have been, a victim of their own success. And I think the OTTs, by definition, have been riding on their backs. Yeah. And I think there's opportunity now for the telcos to claw back a bit and create a bit of value back into the market.
Yeah.
and take not control again, but to certainly add more value than they have been.
And Brendan, I know GBI has been, rolling out newer services, so well beyond just pure kind of infra services, managed services, and also extending reach. So you're changing into something different, I guess, to address this demand, right?
Yeah, I think though, one of the things we still remain very focused on is the target of 100% availability, full diversity of services. And yeah, the service layer is an exciting new development, but from a focus perspective, the ones that are providing the services today want to make sure we've got the depth and breadth of the core infrastructure.
Right.
I remember the days gone by when people were saying that telecoms will just become dumb pipes, and there was no business, any future in the commodity business about cabling. And myself, I got excited by working in areas which are about enterprise services, working closely with the OTTs and doing our own services as well. And that's great, but the fact remains that there are challenges which we spoke about at the beginning of this panel, whether it be the maintenance of the cable, the timelines of the RFS, the availability, the geopolitical situation, which are challenges that some of us have to focus on.
Yeah.
And that means we have to collaborate. That means we have to collaborate much more we did in the past. So when we're talking about diversity in the solution, we need to work with our partners on an end-to-end basis to provide a solution that people can depend on. So yeah, I get the discussion about the value add, the new services on top, but let's just also remember we've got experience in the core infrastructure, and ensure that where there's developments in the core infrastructure, like the capacity increases based on new nanotechnology, whatever it might be, we're the ones working with infrastructure partners, vendors, to bring that to these players that have the ability to develop the services on top. We're never going to be, I think, competing at a level of service management.
Right.
Certainly in the near term, we've got too many challenges as core infrastructure providers.
Yeah. And Bikash, would you subscribe to that? And also, I'd like you to comment on the sort of interconnecting with NAS question as well.
Definitely, I agree with Brendan. Again, we feel it's an ecosystem, right? So Telstra entered into SDN or TPN market in 2016-15. What we realized that you can expand your network, but how you'll reach to the whole world? The whole ecosystem need to be orchestrated so that everyone can get a benefit of it, right? If a customer is sitting in a location, let's say in Dubai data center, and that partner or data center operator is not able to scale, there is no point we offering a NAS as a services. So we believe that NAS as a services is a great thing. It's a way to go forward. But we have to build that full ecosystem, find out the right partner to fit into the whole system in the scheme of things. And then we try to solve the problem of a consumer who want to scale his business at the pace what his business is growing on. He want the connectivity to grow as his business are moving up and down. So if we can deliver that, it has a large potential to grow everyone.
And how difficult is it to, if I could use the word, NASify, when you've got legacy networks that are not necessarily fully software enabled? I mean, Amajit here has got an advantage because he's the new kid on the block and they've done it kind of cloud native from the beginning. But when you've got a legacy to run through, that's quite a few years' work, isn't it?
Find a partner like Amajit.
I'll add to that, and I'm not technical by any stretch, but if you look, voice went through this transition with GPX, right? And GPX is a classic example of the way this is going to develop, I think, where you have
hopefully,
a multi-cloud with S7 signaling and everything else coming into it, and all being translated effectively. And I think that's what's going to happen through collaboration and partnerships with all of these people sitting up here. They will work together. They will make sure they're interoperable because it's to their advantage to be.
Yeah. Now, on the subject of partnerships, I've kind of led up to this rather nicely. People talk about it, but Sohail's here has done it with Zoe. So tell us about that, because you've brought a partner to the table and launched a new entity with a new CEO to drive business and become a much bigger competitor in the region by virtue of that. And also, you've got other special deals, like, for example, with in Dubai. So you're really doing lots to punch up, if I could put it that way. So tell us about that.
So, Zoe, first of all, Amajit, we are 2 days old company, so I take this award. So we just announced this company, but obviously there's a work of, let's say, last 15 years that we've been working in the region, investing in submarine cable systems, deploying networks all across. So the journey of Zoe, I would say, starts somewhere in 2019 when Omantel, an incumbent operator in Oman, acquired 22% stake in Zen Group, which is one of the largest mobile operator group in the region. And we started looking into how to synergize with a mobile operator who has 55 million subscriber base with a company who's a fixed mobile, but predominantly is a fixed operator and an investor in wholesale business. So we started working with Zen team, and eventually this collaboration that we have achieved is basically the carve out of Omantel wholesale business and the carve out of wholesale business of 7 entities of Zen Group within the region and put them into a JV. Now we are talking about a joint venture company which has today around 16 submarine cable systems landed in the region, another investment into other 4 submarine cable system that is going around. Plus we have obviously our land network that we have, terrestrial network within some of our countries, plus we are also in deployment stage of another around 5,000 kilometers within the region at a brand new network to connect all the countries and create a ring around the Gulf, right? Zoe is not to only serve its own opcos, because that's like 5% of our business.
Yeah.
95% of our business is to work with partners like yourself, everyone sitting over here, and provide infrastructure. So I would also say that I'm one of those guys who have worked last 4 years to create a job for myself. And obviously the shareholders and board says, if you have done it, then run it as well.
Yeah.
So it is a challenge, but I believe with if you have a good team, which we already have a very, very good team, I would say some of the gurus in the industry are sitting in our team, it's not something difficult to achieve. And what we want to do is, and I will talk a little bit about the automation, we are basically a predominantly infrastructure provider. We don't do services. We've been providing infrastructure to companies who've done a lot of services on top of it. When it comes to automation, what we are doing is we are working on a marketplace where we will be bringing all our inventory and the cross connects, because we were talking about the cross connects. Mm-hmm. So the cross connects and all our inventory will be on the marketplace, and people can activate directly through the marketplace, even if it's multiple 100 Gs capacity within few hours. This is the first thing that we are doing, being an infrastructure provider towards automation and towards software enablement. And on the partnership, what we have done up till now is we have entered into a partnership with Equinix. We have deployed 2 data centers with Equinix, and they are growing very fast. And now we are going into Saudi Arabia and going to deploy 2 another data centers in Saudi Arabia. Most probably one in Kuwait as well. And we don't go and do, and I was discussing with Amajit yesterday, we don't go and do data center for enterprise business. We are very focused on the niche market that is international. So we build data centers and bring in international content player, international partners like yourself. And this is what we do, and provide transit space. So I think the next step that we are doing in Saudi Arabia and connecting. So we are also invested in Blue Raman. We are 30% owner of Blue Raman, and most probably we're doing something for the first time that is creating a new route, which is going through India to Saudi Arabia, and then through Saudi Arabia we are going through Tel Aviv to Marseille. So this is something that is brand new. We are putting all our efforts to get it done, and hopefully by Q4 next year it will be up and running. But then Dubai in Saudi Arabia is a place which will most probably will be the transit place for everyone in the region. Mm-hmm. And that's what we are trying to achieve.
And how necessary do you think partnering or acquiring and becoming part of a bigger group is vital to success. I mean,
Carl, without any doubt, becoming or moving from one country to 7 other countries, that
Yeah.
gives us a huge potential to grow.
yeah,
If we are, as an example, doing $500 million, we should be doing $2 billion in next 3 years.
yeah,
And that's what expectation level is. That's my expectation from my team, because now we have 7 other grounds to play. And although we are incumbent in Oman, but we have never acted like an incumbent. In the region, I think we have been acting like a challenger, breaking the walls. The cross-connect prices of $1.8 million for 110G, today people are selling it for $5,000.
So industry consolidation, however you define it, is a necessary step to go.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And I think there are 2 ways to grow. One is either you do collaboration, so we can have partnerships with each other, or acquisitions.
Yeah.
I think both model works very fine, but the fastest way is to go with collaboration.
Yeah.
Reach to a level where it makes sense, and then you can go for a acquisition. But unless you are not to a level where it makes sense for business point of view, I think it's better to partnership and go through that learning curve and find out if it is good for us to acquire or not to acquire.
So the real question is, where do you draw the line between do it yourself or do it with somebody else? Because if you came to one of these shows, I don't know, 10 years ago, and you were much younger then, of course, but you probably remember everybody would get up on the podium and show their global network. This is my best global network. This is my best global network. They all look the same, all duplicates and stuff. The industry's kind of got over that now. So, partnering is going to be key. Amajit, I mean, what's your take?
That's an important theme you touch upon, Carl, because our belief is, look, the sum of parts of the network of the future is going to be the best of breed through collaborations. The cloud doesn't have any borders, data doesn't have any borders, it's got to be fungible, and there's no one provider which provides that, right? So I think the collaboration about like-minded operators, like the kind Sohail has done over there, to create fungibility across region really matters. That's one point. Yeah. It's hard to come by though, other than conferences, because it's very difficult to be able to correct. I take a lot of pride. Somebody who runs a 50-year-old network like Telstra uses us in India to be able to transport their data because they find the network better. The second point is, and I think Sohail and I talked about it privately yesterday. Second point is, with the speed and scale of cloud investments, which is trillions of dollars, this also means there are spikes and troughs of investment, which most public telco companies can't afford. Not because they don't have the money, but because the volatility of that expense just destroys the steadiness of public markets. So that brings in the element that globally, at least that's our point of view, much of the infrastructure investments should be, and are being driven by private investments. So that the volatility is cut off, and it saves the telcos from doing what Michael Dell did, which to take Dell private just because he wanted to grow Dell. So these are the 2 points I wanted to make on collaboration and growth.
No, that's really important. Now, as we come down to our last few minutes here, I just want to throw it open to the audience if there are any questions from anybody. I want to make sure we get a close at 5 or close enough. Last question then, and this is for everybody on the panel. So what are the two-barreled, so kind of 2 questions in one. In the so-called emerging countries, because I think they've emerged pretty well, they may be at a different level, but certainly emerged. Where do you see the emerging countries equivalent of FLAP being? Which locations are going to drive everything around? And I'll give you a handful maximum. And where do you think, therefore, the biggest opportunity is? And what are the biggest threats to this being successful going forward? So I'll start with Sohail.
A tough question.
I'll give you a minute each, because otherwise we could be here for an hour.
I will talk about our region, Middle East. I personally believe UAE Oman, Saudi Arabia. These are the three locations which can really create a flap for the region and a corridor between these countries, bypassing some of the submarine routes which are now challenging locations. And that is something that we can do, I think. What was the second question?
And the second question, where do you think the biggest, financial opportunity will be?
I think the biggest financial opportunity will be with the hyperscalers.
Okay.
Because they are moving into our region and all the demand is driven by them. Because today, the localization of content in our region is reached to around 85 to 90%. So in reality, telecom operators doesn't require a lot of bandwidth going out. It is those hyperscalers who are putting in their edge nodes and their cloud deployments who require those. And because of their company policies, they need 3 cable systems. They will start growing by once they touch 50%. So that's the financial. And I think the challenge on making a flap in the region, unfortunately, I think it's the emotions of the government of those countries.
Yeah.
I want to be the first one. I want to be the largest, and I want to be the only one.
Yeah.
That's going to create some challenges.
Yeah, so they have to collaborate too, basically. Okay.
Good luck.
Thank you. Cash.
Sorry, sir, but I feel that you are already an emerged market. You are no longer an emerging market, right? Middle East is not the same what it used to be 10 years ago. First, you become a transit hub. You are connecting East and West. So, in our view, again, Telstra has been operating into these markets like India, Middle East, and some of the South Asian market for a long time. What we are seeing the potential is while these section will remain critical for the digital growth or new digital story. And one, either they are transiting a large population demand from one side to other side of the world. That's what is happening in this region. I'm talking about India, Middle East in a frame. We are seeing a lot of opportunity coming into the other side, eastern side of the world, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines. I mean, we have witnessed that the demand is growing like 6 times in 3 years, 4 year time. So that's where we believe that the new emerging market, where the new business model can be ventured out, young talent, raw system, and governments who are ready to work with us in an open way. They are ready to open their borders, and things will change on that part of the world more drastically than what we have seen or witnessed in the last 10 years.
Okay, thank you. Brendan.
Yeah, some thoughts on this. I think when you think about the Middle East region, the actual development has been very polarized to some of the countries you mentioned earlier, Sahel, in terms of there's been first mover advantage in places like UAE. And the rest of the region has looked and saying, what's going on here? Is this what we really want? But the world is now digitalizing, and it's very much a digitalization across populations, whether they be US-based, whether what's happening in Africa now. And I'm a great believer that the populations will basically drive the adoption of the services. And us as providers, infrastructure providers, need to make sure we're aligning with those populations to support the adoption of services. So I think things will change. I think there'll be a lot more equalization around the regions and around the emerging regions, which will probably put them more in the not emerging classification, but for my mind, we are still emerging. And I think point also mentioned in terms of the regulation, it's been quite a protectionist type region at the moment. And that's in terms of local last mile pricing, for instance, protectionism in terms of access to cable landing stations. Again, the liberalization of the economy, the regional economy needs to happen. There's a 65% of people in the Middle East are under 25 years old. Now, there's a great society potential for developing new services. Prices need to come down. They need to be closer to what they are in the rest of the world to be able to get the investment, the outside investment of some of the big OTTs to the levels that have happened elsewhere in the world. These things need to happen, and these are happening. There's a much better adoption now. Ourselves, GBI, we've been working with Meta, for instance, in the last 18 months. We've introduced a second POP to what Omantel did in Oman. And again, that's giving localized, we haven't talked about edge computing, localized services, Arabic content to that 65% of the population want to be able to use some of these services, access content. And the same thing is being done with the likes of Microsoft and Google, etc., and being able to provide the services. But the services won't evolve and develop to what they need to unless we work as a coordinated ecosystem, collaborating to, at the end of the day, deliver the services that are in demand.
Okay, thanks, Brendan. Amajit.
Yeah, interesting question, Carl. Look, our thinking is simple. Wherever is the source of origination of consumption, there is undeniable traffic and money to be made. And that's really is about the population dividend. So you look at Indonesia, Southeast Asia, and India, where I sit down, there's just undeniable the next billion internet users. Some are not even connected. And if you just attach 300 Mbps per home, you'll figure out what the traffic is. So no wonder people like Meta have a next billion connect program. So that's undeniable. You can't run away from that. The question really is, how does the traffic then move through transit corridors seamlessly to be able to run to the hub and spoke, which cloud formalizes? So to that extent, I think I'm in no doubt that the source and origin of the traffic as well as the transit is somewhere around Asia going through Middle East. And that is going to be the golden corridor as far as we are concerned.
Yeah.
Second is the issue of, you talked about, what was the second issue you talked about? Where is money to be made? I think we are pretty clear. If this is the corridor and this is where data moves, there will be two things which will happen. One, the hyperscalers will have to build points of presence across this corridor, which is fungible. Provided regulators are out for it, incumbents don't block them, that's a natural outcome. There's money to be made in passing these corridors of traffic. The second is your network as a service. I mean, users don't care where the cloud is. They want to connect an Azure session up to GCP at a click of a button, not waiting for the truck roll of the fiber guy to come and connect his home. So that's the second opportunity. So the summary is both opportunities pivot around the cloud and how the cloud transits.
Okay, thanks. And Sean?
I'm standing between you and drinks, so I'll talk real fast. Right. To answer both your questions in like 30 seconds, I'd say in the Middle East, Egypt as a choke point. I think the opportunities around that with projects like those that are coming through Jordan, Israel, KSA down into the Red Sea, Duba is, I think, going to be the next hotspot in the Middle East region, beyond Oman, and particularly Salalah. Right, Salala's come onto the radar big time. It's sort of overtaken Djibouti, more sensible pricing. You've got wonderful people like Johannes there who are helping to really internationalise the whole GCC region, and you guys have done an awesome job with that. But I think Duba's a place to watch moving forward with NEOM coming and the Egypt bypass avoiding the taxes. So I think that bypass is a great opportunity. In Asia, I think the Malacca Strait is an opportunity. I think it's a massive choke point, the second choke point in the world. I think at one point the Malacca is 1.5 kilometres wide. Every cable goes through there.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's some fantastic work that Lightstorm are doing, looking at a bypass across Thailand and coming down to Singapore in the Gulf of Thailand to bypass the Malacca Strait. I think that's a great solution. It also solves for India getting Chennai straight across to Rayong, Chennai straight across to Asia without having to go through Singapore as a single point of failure. And the third choke point is the South China Sea.
Yeah.
Geopolitics aren't going to change in our lifetimes while we're sitting on this panel ever. So the opportunity to make money there is new cables, Singapore to Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, bypassing the South China Sea. So there's a lot of money to be made out of the problems we've historically created for ourselves. Now's the time to have a go.
I think just to comment on that in terms of the Middle East, I mean, most, if not all of the traffic is passed through the Red Sea in Egypt. And that now is a choke point. And from our perspective, GBI, we've always looked at new routes to give a diversity. And that's why we're looking north at countries like Iraq, and we invested considerably in that in the last 12, 18 months. Again, historically not performed, historically, politically not been interested in $400 million worth of transit revenue. Why, I don't know. But there's been other considerations there, of course. But now I think things are maturing and we're going to see new routes like that develop. And that's what it's all about, diversity and a mesh of different providers providing smaller players like us that don't have, at the moment, last mile, at the moment don't have maybe data centers, which is something we're looking at, but can add to that fabric in the hyperscaler world.
Okay, well, thank you for all that. Just a very, very quick sum up. Huge opportunity, huge willingness to cooperate, but there's exogenous factors, regulators, geopolitics, geography, and what have you, which means that it's going to be interesting to see how this Rolex mechanism gets put together, because when it does, it's worth a lot of money, but it's really fiddly to get there. So with that thought, I'd like to thank you all for coming here. Wish you all a great evening, and let's have a great round of applause for a terrific panel. Thank you.